Hello again, I'm Catherine Moldenhauer and this is the American Whisper. Moving on now to Amy Lowell. For starters, what I found important about Amy is I didn't understand that she was a turn-of-the-century poet from the 19th to the 20th century. I thought she was a contemporary poet. So when I first read her without her biop, I thought that she was someone maybe recently deceased or was still writing today. So in that sense, I'm going to call her more of a third wave feminist. I watched several YouTubes that were trying to define this phenomenon, and one of them was like, oh, if you're a third wave feminist, you can support whatever women do. If it's what women want to do, it's right to do. So that's not how I define third wave feminism. I find it something that's a lot more, that needs more erudition and a lot more of a principality and a sense of social dialogue. So I would call third wave feminism a belief system that it came after second wave feminism, in which a lot of women believed work or indoctrination into categories traditionally associated with masculinity would help to alleviate the essential burdens of women's oppression, things like becoming soldiers and joining the career force in general. So to me, third wave feminism is very much based off the research of their achievements. And so in my opinion, what's more happened philosophically is that a lot of women will tell you it didn't work. They would find that as they entered, more and more prestigious lives, the same sort of fundamental problems of women's oppression were still very much affected by. They were still felt very poor. Things like sexual harassment, for one, medical care, the essential ability to move into men's world didn't necessarily change anything about the concept or idea of woman itself. And so, to me, third wave feminism is something of a reattempt at going back to this sort of vague piece of history surrounding suffrage and its nearness in time period to the Bolshevik Revolution, and starting to ask, what were they really saying? Who were they? And then what were they doing? And so to me, a lot of it is questions surrounding modes of production and how much women really own. It's a lot more about ownership, how much property women own, ideas of whether or not you can change the essential definition of woman in order to, start to understand it as something that can be not abused, essentially. Anyway, so I started with Joseph Beuys as an artist. That was someone, he's painted into the 80s. That was someone at first, when I first read Amy Lowell, that was trying to help me articulate or find out what she's about, Because at first, when Joseph Beuys talks about that front space, to me she was a very, very cerebral writer at first, that she writes because she enjoys the mediatizing and the journalistic aspects of it. She's not really heartfelt. But later, when I read more of her biop, what I found most important, despite the amount of information, what I notice when I read anthologies of white women authors is that there's always an essential derision in their life. It's more important to biographize them as some sort of insult, like Amy Lowell was fat. She lives her whole life doing all this activity, and the biographer decides what's most important is that Amy was fat. So for me, I'm just going to get rid of the biop, but I'm going to say what's important about the biop is that she wrote, a lot of her poetry for an older woman who was her lover and companion, Ada Russell. And so I'm roughly going to talk about the poems Venus Transiens, Opal, Madonna of the Evening Flower, and letters. So what I find interesting there is that she's someone who had a sexuality where she could understand a lot of men at the time. When I think about what she's doing there, I think about like Willem de Kooning. When he paints women, you know, he has a lot of like trepidation. You know, he experiences a lot of intimidation about women that when he paints, or Picasso, or you know, I think when you read Amy Lowell, I think what she does with a lot of men in Western history is sort of emote and make literate and conscious that a lot of their own sense of masculinity surrounding the intimidating aspects of women itself. And so what I find about her poetry is the definition of like fauvism as wild beast. You get the sense of her viewing her paramour in a very animalistic sense, where she's, you know, sort of timid and on edge and not really knowing what to do if she sees her. She's very vulnerable and dependent on her lover. So so that I liked that I came to that realization, because after I read her again with that sort of idea that she was writing to someone, I couldn't really get like a grasp of what she was really doing there, because, you know, she's not like any of the other writers compiled. She doesn't have, you know, an intense series of images that, you know, add up to a whole, and she gives like very little insight into anything that's really going on, and she strips everything out but, you know, that one essential image or experience of being around this person. And so you watch her have moon and silver repeated throughout each of these, you know, dialogues, pleas, or senses of mercy almost, like she's asking for mercy. So anyway, as far as her biop, I guess they call her a wealthy person, but for me, what I most notice about her is that she was really poor, that people see about her that she only had what she had, she only could have desires for being a writer, and, you know, was essentially kind of poor.